Kirby, Nintendo's lovable pink puffball, originated in 1992 in Kirby's Dream Land for Game Boy. Created by future Smash director Masahiro Sakurai, Kirby was designed as a gateway character into video games, with his inhale being a simple offensive and defensive tool with a single push of a button, and his flight allowing for newer players to bypass platforming sections they found difficult. This idea was expanded upon in the NES sequel Kirby's Adventure, where they introduced copy abilities. Using the inhale function, you could choose to press down instead of spitting enemies out, gaining said enemy's power. This, beyond being a fantastic power trip, gave players a variety of options in regards to how they handled what the game threw at them. When implementing Kirby into Smash, much of its design philosophy has carried over, but some issues have arisen. With many older Smash characters, they were introduced to the series more than half their history ago, and as such feel lacking in terms of how they represent their series, with most of them still feeling very much like the same character from the N64 Smash. Nintendo has made great strides in alleviating this problem, but they also had to strike a balance between that, keeping them familiar to longtime Smash players, and making the characters feel distinct compared to others on the roster, which as you can imagine is no small task. In this series, we will be redesigning Smash characters to better represent their home series, feel more unique on the roster either in terms of gameplay or visuals, and adjusting balance, all the while factoring in what people like about the characters. Who knows, we might learn something along the way. Before we can understand Kirby's flaws and what we can do to fix them, we need to first acknowledge what they did right with him. We can't just say his recovery is exploitable or he is too simple, because there is often a reason for this. Even if taken a bit too far, he is supposed to be exploitable in air, much like his home series. He is also intended to be a simple character for newer players to latch onto. His moveset and attributes are intended to be easy to understand. On the ground, he doesn't feel slow, but he's also not too fast so that those who have never touched a video game controller would have trouble keeping track of him. His moves do exactly what you'd expect them to do. Up move goes up, down move goes down, that sort of thing. In particular, down special helps to escape juggle situations, making said new players feel less pressured, and can be easily cancelled so they don't die if they use it off stage. This easy to understand nature of his moveset is made even clearer by his normals, which allow for easy bread and butter combos, a dash attack with good kill power, and his inhale allowing for some cheeky kills once the player realizes it can be used off stage. His multiple jumps, although extremely linear, help give a newer player the illusion of having a greater sense of self-control. Even though Kirby's recovery is extremely exploitable from a competitive standpoint, it succeeds in making newer players think they can always make it back, even though that is clearly not the case. Part of this is because in the case of free-for-alls, Kirby will not be the main focus of the other players, so Kirby has the time to make it back uninterrupted. His final smash is also something I'm quite fond of, although I think Smash Ultimate overdid it when it comes to making so many of its final smashes just press the B button and watch a cutscene. I think it's fine on a beginner-friendly character like Kirby. Since Kirby fights primarily at close range and Ultra Sword is a rather fast final smash, it's pretty easy to land, whether it's just a raw final smash in neutral or out of something like an up tilt or a down air. One last thing to note is being able to copy the neutral specials of his opponent. Outside of being a brilliant way to implement his use of copy abilities from the Kirby series, it showcases how changes in character attributes can alter how a move functions. With many abilities, Kirby often has additional uses for a move in the matchup that allow him to use it better than his opponent. While many uses stem from Kirby's character attributes, namely his jump height and the 1.2 times power multiplier these moves get, my favorite is probably Jigglypuff. Rollout in this matchup has the potential to insta-kill Jigglypuff due to Puff's shield break animation, something Puff can't do back to Kirby. Although hard to pull off, it is immensely satisfying. Kirby, however, is not perfect obviously. No one in any fighting game is. All things considered, I think Kirby is one of the game's better designed characters, but there are some things I think can be improved upon. First off, speed. I think Kirby should be fairly average on the ground, yet slow in the air, since that's how he functions in his games. However, in platform fighters, a much greater emphasis is placed on movement and how that affects combat. As such, it just seems off how much of a brick Kirby feels like whenever he leaves the ground. Other characters with similar air speeds tend to not feel like this, or at least not to the same degree because they are so slow normally. For example, while Incineroar, the slowest character on the ground, goes from a max run speed of 1.18 to 0.88, a roughly 26% reduction in max speed, Kirby goes from 1.727 to 0.84, a reduction of roughly 52%. Although Kirby is one of the few characters I could see having such a dramatic decrease, it still feels a bit rough. This is furthered by the fact that Kirby, like all characters with more than 2 jumps, cannot use these additional jumps in quick succession like you can when following a jump with a double jump. This leaves the use of his jumps predictable and gives him trouble chasing opponents in the air, as well as making his recovery insanely exploitable once you get used to the game. His throws also seem a bit off, or at least his down throw does. Granted, it is hard to design throws from a gameplay perspective. His forward throw is an excellent combo starter at low to mid percents. Up throw deals strong damage by throw standard and is a usable kill option that becomes much stronger on stages with platforms. And back throw is an easy way to get the opponent off stage and put it in position to get gimped. It also comes with a bonus of comboing into back air at some percentages. Down throw, meanwhile, is relatively useless. Sure, it's Kirby's most damaging throw, but not by much, beating out up throw by only 2%, with up throw also being a better kill move. Of course, there isn't really much you can do to give a throw a purpose, with Kirby's other 3 throws covering basically everything. Not like I can make it a better move in neutral either, since you have to win neutral in order to have access to it in the first place. His down tilt also presents an issue. Depending on where you hit with his foot, it has between a 37 and 42% chance to trip, and if he gets it, his follow-ups open up significantly. Not against either RNG or tripping as mechanics, but this seems like a poor use of both. The RNG doesn't really do anything but make a Kirby player disappointed if he doesn't get it, and the opponent annoyed if Kirby does get it. While tripping would obviously be insanely aggravating if put on a bunch of moves that over your cast, for the most part it's used sparingly on moves that have little other utility. Another issue comes from his animations, not his gameplay. Although he always seems so adorable and determined as he should, throughout the Smash series a recurring problem has been many of his moves feeling uninspired, particularly his normals. This is less of an issue than in previous Smash games, namely Brawl and Smash 4, where we had a dash attack based on yo-yo that just looked like a generic weak spin move, but he is still lacking in this area. Namely, several of his aerials and his jab could be seen as being based on Fighter, or in some cases inspiring the modern versions of Fighter, but just looking like weak generic look at me hit in this general direction with my hands and feet moves. The smash attacks, as far as I'm aware, don't really reference anything, once again just being meant to hit in a general direction with his feet. His dash attack also has a particular issue, but is not that big of one. Despite being a dash attack with more kill power than some characters' smash attacks, it feels kind of weak. Feeling of impact is commonly done with sound design, which the early strongest hit nails, but the rest feels kind of like you're hitting them with a wet flame. Even then, the movement speed of the move and a lack of build-up makes that initial hit feel slightly underwhelming to me personally, but it's not something I want to focus too much on since it's more of a minor annoyance. Finally, there is the issue of how well he represents his home series. Imagine you give 100 people the task of designing a Kirby Smash moveset from scratch and they can take inspiration from anything in any game. You'd very likely get almost every single one of them being noticeably distinct from one another. In fact, you could probably redo this experiment with a smaller number of 10 people and tell them to make a moveset based off of just one Kirby game, and you'd get a similar result. That's how much you can do with this character. He has so many abilities over the years that would naturally fit into a fighting game moveset. Meanwhile, his abilities in Smash come from the following games. Considering there are well over 50 copy abilities, not even factoring in things like combination abilities in Kirby 64, Orca Robots, and Planet Robobot, it seems weird to have such a small representation of the series. On top of that, he doesn't even have one of his most iconic abilities, Sword. Of course, fixing this comes with the issue of making him potentially not feel like a Smash Kirby we all know and love, but I think I can get around that problem. The interesting thing about Kirby is that from a gameplay perspective he is mostly well designed. Nintendo had the goal of creating a version of Kirby that was easy to understand at a basic level, who specializes in close quarters combat, but struggles at a distance and has a fairly exploitable recovery. When redesigning him, if the goal is to improve upon Ultimate Kirby in ways that make sense from both a gameplay and a series representation standpoint, we have to keep these things in mind. Although some of his weaknesses can be seen as overdone and some of his moves lack a clear purpose, we can't just remove these weaknesses entirely. That's how you end up with Brawl Meta Knight or Smash 4 Bayonetta. If any changes we make buff Kirby, we have to make sure he keeps his weaknesses, make sure they're exploitable ones. For example, Brawl Meta Knight has the weakness of being one of the game's lightest characters, but exploiting this weakness is tricky as it requires you to hit a small, agile ball with multiple jumps, several recovery moves, fast disjoints, and near unparalleled mobility. Now then, I unfortunately do not have the ability to mod Smash Ultimate, which means adjusting character attributes is a bit tricky. My only real option is using Spirits, which is unreliable for a variety of reasons. Adjusting character attributes is a difficult thing to do when you can't properly test them. At best, I can theorize how changes in things like airspeed and air acceleration affect the rest of Kirby's kit. At worst, it's completely unpredictable. Because of this, my changes to Kirby's base attributes are rather small adjustments. I'd like to test out different changes and find the perfect combination of airspeed and air acceleration to help Kirby feel less like a brick without breaking how Kirby is intended to play, but the best I can do is make small adjustments based on what can be seen in other characters. For the purpose of this redesign, I am buffing his airspeed from 0.84 to 0.9. This may seem like a tiny, meaningless boost, but it would make him the fastest he's ever been in a Smash game, being a buff of roughly 3.6 units per frame. Considering Kirby is intended to be slow in the air in both Smash and his home series, I think this is a fine change to make. If possible, I'd love to actually do some testing and find the perfect airspeed for what I'm going for, but for now, this is fine. Then, there's the matter of air acceleration. Kirby actually already has some of the fastest air acceleration in the game, ranking as part of a 5-way tie for 15th. However, because his base air acceleration is high and his additional acceleration is low, his control over how fast he accelerates is limited. Although I like this decision mimicking how he feels in his actual game, I think a light buff is in order. This is partially due to the increase of airspeed I gave him, which means it now takes slightly longer to reach max speed. I'll be buffing his base acceleration to 0.0325 and his additional acceleration to 0.0675 for a new max of 0. This means that from a standing position, once you jump in the air and hold as far in one horizontal direction as you can on the stick, you reach max speed in 9 frames. This is technically 0.16 frames slower than the normal amount of time it takes him to reach max speed, but that difference is so minor that by all accounts this buff achieves the purpose of keeping the amount of time it takes for Kirby to reach max speed roughly the same despite the airspeed buff. Also keeps his control of how fast he accelerates limited. Next is probably the single biggest change I'm going to make. As I mentioned earlier, all characters in Smash Ultimate can use their second jump at pretty much any point during their regular jump, while those with multiple air jumps cannot use their third jump during their second or their fourth during their third, and so on. Out of all the ways to balance a character with several jumps, this just seems odd. It's a way to hinder the use of these jumps that also hinders how enjoyable the character is to move around with. It shouldn't come as a surprise then that other developers have questioned this idea. In particular, McLeod Gaming, the makers of Smash Flash 1 and 2, make it to where you can use these jumps in quick succession. These jumps are already kept in check by either poor air movement or other attributes of the character. This change keeps Kirby's recovery exploitable, yes, but it gives him more timing mix-ups and lets him recover to the stage quicker. It also gives him more options in his combo game, letting a small flying piece of gum chase people in the air a bit more effectively. It is this change that I'd like to implement. On top of this, there is another change I'd like to make to his recovery. A buff that gives Kirby one more option but still leaves him fairly exploitable. Put simply, I'm going to be reworking dash attack into a side special. In the actual Kirby games, the move dash attack is based on is a simple flaming burst forward that can be used on the ground or in the air. Goes a fairly short distance, so it wouldn't exactly be that huge of a buff to his recovery, and it also achieves a feeling of impact through the burst of fire surrounding Kirby, as well as the move's startup. In modern Kirby games, the move keeps Kirby in place for a few frames as he transitions into the move, building up to the actual action where he quickly moves forward for a fraction of a second. Earlier Kirby games even take this a step farther by having Kirby move backwards slightly during the windup. I'll be taking a backwards wind-up approach. Here is how Fireball, or Burning as it's known in the earlier Kirby games as Kirby's side special works. When activated, Kirby will move backwards slightly for 12 frames before bursting forward. For reference, the speed and distance it travels is enough to where if you're on one end of a battlefield platform, even with you traveling backwards slightly, the distance traveled will put you on that other end of the platform in an amount of time only slightly slower than Kirby running the same distance. In addition, as the move travels, its hitboxes get weaker as the fire itself gets less vibrant. The actual fire effects are also smaller to closely match the move's hitbox size, which are the same in size as normal dash attack, but with a few different properties. Smash Ultimate, the move is intended to be a burst movement option on the ground that kills, with many characters dying in the 80 to 95% range. If we're trying to make a short range, quick moving recovery mix-up, we want it to be easy to challenge, so making it a strong kill move probably isn't that good of an idea. In the event that an opponent tries to challenge the move off stage, we want the move to send away from Kirby enough to effectively reset the edge guard if they collide with Kirby, with both Kirby and the opponent being sent a medium distance of sorts. We'll be keeping the damage and launch angles the same as they already do the job I want them to do, but we'll be drastically lowering the base knockback from 82 to 20, with knockback growth being boosted to 80. Using Mario as an example, the move has roughly 44 knockback and 16 frames of hit stun at 0%, achieving that reset the edge guard effect I want to achieve. It is, however, far weaker as a kill move. I don't think a character with 5 jumps and multiple linear recovery moves should have these moves be reliable as kill options. His new side special kills Mario at roughly 150% with a clean hit. The mid and late hitboxes also do the same damage, but their base knockback has been reduced to 20 with a buff of their knockback growth to 56. Ideally, the opponent would want to attack Kirby later in the move animation, but most often the opponent would just go for a quick hit to make sure they hit Kirby. Beyond the knockback properties, it has 13 frame startup, being easily reactable when factoring in it taking time to travel, with each hitbox being active for 6 frames, and the end lag being 24 frames and putting you in special fall. Other properties worth noting is that it does not cross up shields and bounces up ledges and walls slightly. Any other Smash game it would, but I'm treating it as something similar to Fox Side B with less speed and range but more power. One idea that was suggested to me when I was brainstorming a move was the idea of letting you charge it to mix up the timing, but I don't want Kirby to have too many recovery options. The recovery in its new state has plenty of options, but they are all not particularly good, either being reactable, going a short distance, or only being good for either high or lower recoveries. Once again, his recovery should be better, but still easily exploitable. With this dash attack reworked into a side special, this of course brings up the question of what happened to his hammer, and what is his new dash attack. Let's start with the latter. So we no longer have a kill move in the form of his dash attack. Kirby also can use his jumps more quickly, further opening up his combo tree. We also need to find a way to incorporate the sword ability somewhere into his moveset. It's one of his first copy abilities, even being the first one we see in Kirby's Adventure. And it just so happens, the sword ability's dash attack in many Kirby games, especially the modern ones, is a fast burst movement option that is good for setting up aerial strings. The exact thing I want out of a Kirby dash attack. A movement option that emphasizes what Kirby is best at. So let's establish what we want this move to do in Smash. We need it to be a good early stock combo starter, so low end lag, damage, and base knockback. High enough knockback scaling to prevent Kirby from having a bunch of stupid easy kill confirms off of a dash attack combo. So let's start with the move's frame data. A good comparison to make here would be Squirtle's dash attack. It basically does everything we want Kirby to do, but given Kirby's slow airspeed, multiple jumps, and obviously his different moveset, it doesn't quite cut it, but it does give us a good template. Now then, Kirby's new dash attack will have 10 frame startup, rather slow by dash attack standards. We don't want him to just spam it all over the place, but we do want him to have low enough end lag and enough interruptible frames to still be a good combo tool. After it activates, it is active for 6 frames, moving very quickly along the ground in a distance roughly equal to a battlefield platform. It will have 33 frames of end lag for a total of 48 frames for the move to complete. This makes it less punishable than his original dash attack as well as Squirtle's dash attack, however it can only be interrupted from frame 37 onward, meaning that although it's less punishable, it can be acted out of later, also having a smaller window to do so, although it's still fairly generous in that regard. Damage is also something to consider. For this, I have decided upon 7% base damage with no tipper or late hitbox in order to keep things simple. Now, when factoring in the movement forward, a launch angle of 65, and first actionable frame of 40, one combo I want to be possible is dash attack into back air. Unlike Squirtle, we move a bit too far forward to just dash attack into raw back air. We need to move backward slightly first. Back air has 6 frame startup, meaning that at first it seems we'd need the opponent to not be actionable until frame 47 or later. Thing is, that's a ludicrous amount of hit stun for a move at 0%. But let's assume you hit the opponent on frame 10, the first frame possible. Most characters generally have a fast aerial that is meant to serve as a get off me tool in the air, a sort of combo breaker. Many characters such as Sheik or Mario do this via what's known as a sex kick, moves that come out very fast, frame 3 in the case of the above examples, and get weaker throughout the long-lasting duration of the move. In this example, we just need Kirby Bear to come out before the fast aerial. So, if the opponent can input a move on frame 44, it will come out on frame 47, the window we are looking for. Other than a few exceptions like Little Mac Nair, this is about as fast as we need to account for. So in our example, this move deals 7 damage, has 60 base knockback, 66 knockback growth, and a hit stun modifier of plus 5. So, let's say Mario at 0% gets hit on frame 10. By frame 44, Mario can now input his Nair as Kirby's Bear is only 2 frames away from coming out. Even though Kirby has to move backwards slightly to hit Mario, because the launch angle of the dash attack sends Mario forward, he doesn't have to move much, hitting Mario due to the hit stun. This should be an easy 2-hit string dealing 21% if neither move is stalled. And the great thing is that depending on the percent, DI, and when you hit the opponent, you can get a variety of other strings and combos. Let's say you hit later with the move, like frame 12. This means because the opponent is being hit later, the opponent enters hit stun later, meanwhile Kirby can start acting at the same point he could before. Now all of a sudden up air juggle strings are possible with your newly buffed multiple jumps. And these are just the basic scenarios. You could likely do this with all kinds of low to mid percent combos with this dash attack, although it obviously isn't exactly the best at later percentages. And then we have his hammer, now a forward smash. Hammer in Kirby games has always been one of the hardest hitting copy abilities. If we're replacing his side special, which was Hammer, with Burning, it should come as no surprise that I made Hammer a smash attack. I chose forward smash since in many Kirby games most of Hammer's moveset, if not all of it, struggles to hit opponents above it, removing up smash from the selection, with down smash for most characters being a quick but weak smash attack that attacks on both sides of the user, leaving only forward smash as a strong option. Normally, forward smash achieves its high kill power via low base knockback, but very good knockback scaling. This makes sense. After all, why would a simple little kick from the pink puffball send much of anywhere at 0%? In comparison, his new smash attack is a mighty hammer swing. As such, I felt it made sense to give it a bit more force behind it at early percentages. In order to achieve this, I nerfed its knockback scaling to 85, but buffed base knockback to 50 and damage to 16.8. It still kills like the same percent, but with a bit more impact early on. As you can see, I also adjusted the stats on the weak hit to still kill like the same percent it did before, but with way less base knockback. Animation wise, it's a mix of Kirby's regular forward smash and side special. The animation for uncharge is taken from his side special. Simple hammer swing forward. An interesting property his regular forward smash has is lunging forward, giving it decent range. this will be maintained but altered slightly. In this moveset, an uncharged F smash will go only a small fraction of its normal distance, roughly 1/4, and will instead gain distance as you charge, dragging Kirby further along the more power you have built up. At 30 frames of charge, it reaches its full distance equal to his current forward smash. At 60 frames of charge, the point at which smash attacks reach full power, it gains a more upward swing with the same animation and effects as its current side special equivalent, although noticeably weaker as a result of being on a smash attack instead of being its own move. This gives the move an extended vertical hitbox, although don't expect to see this often. Overall, I think this move is slightly worse, but it still does a lot of the same functions as his normal forward smash, while also being a bit more interesting visually and freeing up a special move slot. I'd say a small nerf to his forward smash is a small price to pay for those benefits, especially given the more significant buffs I gave him elsewhere. For his other smash attacks, the only one I'd like to go over is his up smash, which is now a disjoint via the fact that it's now based off the yo-yo copy ability, a fan favorite from Kirby Superstar. Outside the disjoint, nothing really changes gameplay wise, it's just a strong upwards yo-yo swing covering the same arc as before. Now let's take a break from the more major changes and instead discuss something a bit more simple, his down throw. As I mentioned earlier, there isn't really much you can do when designing throws in Smash Bros, and Kirby's other 3 throws already fill all the roles you'd want them to. The only thing down throw has going for it is easy damage output, dealing 12%. If you've ever had the experience of trying to get into Smash as a small child, or have tried to help someone who doesn't play Smash get into the series, you've likely noticed 2 things. First is that Kirby is one of the characters new players seem to gravitate towards, and the second is that they suck at dealing damage, not understanding how to consistently do combos or even what most of their moves do. So having a move that does a decent amount of damage off of something as simple and easy as a grab is nice. This seems to be what they're going for with down throw, as it has been his most damaging throw since Brawl, which was a game that was built around being more beginner friendly than the previous 2 Smash titles. Despite this, however, it only does 2% more in this game than up throw, which still does 10%, quite a lot by throw standards, and has the added benefit of being a solid kill throw. So I decided to buff the first 10 hits of down throw to deal 1.2% and the final hit to deal 2.4. Although not much of a buff, this makes it one of, if not the single most damaging throw in the game. Although lacking in the utility and small combo strings of back throw, kill power of up throw, or generally solid combos off of forward throw, at a beginner level being able to deal 14.4% off of a grab is quite helpful. Now we have both a cosmetic and a gameplay change, and that's using Archer Kirby to help us represent the modern Kirby games. Starting with a cosmetic change, when Kirby crouches he starts hiding behind one of Archer's camouflaged cardboard cutouts. Like his Smash Stone transformations, these will be inspired by Smash while also referencing his home series in some way. Cutouts I thought of include 3 ripped straight from the ability, being King Dedede, a pretty self-explanatory reference, the HAL Laboratories logo, as not only did they make Kirby, but they were the team behind the first 3 Smash titles, and a tree, which could be seen as a reference to Villager's Down special. I also came up with 3 more. The first of which is a cardboard cutout of a cardboard box in reference to Snake's cardboard box down taunt. Next is a clipboard in reference to Dr. Kirby and Dr. Mario. And the last is probably my personal favorite, an RPG text box. This is in reference to the computer virus boss fight in Kirby Superstar and Superstar Ultra, which was a parody of the RPG genre, specifically the RPGs of Square Enix at the time. Although I'm a bit more of a fan of the text box design of Superstar Ultra's variant, I think the original works better here, as it's a much more clear reference to Cloud, as under default settings this is what could be seen from menus and text boxes throughout most of the Final Fantasy series, and even when Cloud charges his limit in Smash. Moving on from the cutouts, let's talk gameplay. Simply put, in this crouching state he is still pretty visible and just as hittable as his crouch normally is in Smash. Just like the Archer ability, he can also slowly crawl along the ground. The last thing we'll be taking from Archer is the arrow attack he uses while in this state. It will be our replacement for down tilt, and as simple as this may seem, this was probably the hardest part of the redesign for me to create, with me going through several versions of the move in order to get it right. It has two hitboxes. One is the actual bow itself, which is roughly half the hitbox size of his current down tilt and always trips. And the second is the arrow, which is obviously a simple projectile that does no knockback similar to Fox Laser, but can only be used as part of this tilt attack. Even with the reduced hitbox size, this move can easily be seen as overkill though, and I spent quite a bit of time trying to get the frame data on this move right. Normally when a down tilt in Ultimate gives as much reward as this, it has some sort of downside. Normally for this move that is tripping being a matter of RNG, but I made it guaranteed, meaning I needed to find another way to balance it. Ultimately, I decided to make it a bit less spammable and neutral, making it quite a bit harder to hit when combined with a smaller hitbox. In terms of frame data, this move is 11 frames slower, coming out on frame 15 instead of 4. After that, the hitbox, like usual, remains out for 2 extra frames for 3 frames total, with the arrow hitbox firing on frame 18, launching a distance roughly equal to Kalos Pokemon League. After that, the move continues on normally, with the added 11 frames of startup making the move interruptible on frame 32 and ending at frame 40 if you do not interrupt it. Although this move is technically reactable, that's not the main reason for these changes, as the goal was more about making it less spammable. At this point, the move is roughly 50% longer and has a smaller hitbox, but comes with a bonus of more consistent benefit for hitting it, be it a guaranteed chance instead of it varying depending on where you hit with his foot. I'm sure some are wondering why I made it always trip instead of not trip at all, and it's because at higher levels, a lot of his best combos come from the trip, so if I just removed it I'd be nerfing Kirby hard, especially since without tripping it's just a move with low range, power, and hit stun. Considering the difficulty of landing it in an actual match, the guaranteed trip chance isn't that bad, and personally I'd rather be hit by a move that always trips than trip after getting hit by a move where whether or not I take 30 or 70% comes down to RNG. One last thing to mention is the arrow. Although I briefly compared it to Fox Laser earlier, the only 3 things they really have in common is a lack of flinching, the hitbox size, and how fast they travel. It's stronger than Fox Laser at 5% per hit and doesn't get weaker as it travels like it does with Fox, but it's way worse at racking up damage due to being attached to Kirby's down tilt. At long ranges, it's just so Kirby has something he can do. Mainly it's useful at close ranges as it allows you to add slightly more damage to your down tilt combos, as well as possibly get damage on the opponent even if you miss the down tilt. Our final gameplay change is an interesting one. That's a change to Kirby's shield. We will be basing it off the mirror copy ability who can block in order to reflect projectiles. I'm making it to where Kirby's shield does not shrink, instead cracking to indicate shield damage and depletion. When this shield is used to parry, the shield acts as a reflector. Reflector is fairly typical in terms of speed and power, being a 1.5 times power multiplier and a 1.4 times speed multiplier. Although reflectors are in some cases much stronger or faster in this game, these are pretty middle of the road stats for such a move, which I think works well since learning the parry timing for projectiles is honestly pretty easy thanks to the travel time of said projectile. In fact, because of this, I considered making it weaker, but this is ultimately what I settled upon. And our final 2 alterations are purely visual. First is making it to where Kirby's hat changes to match the ability he is using. And lastly, some more stone transformation. As I discussed earlier with Archer, the stone transformations in Smash not only reference various things from the other Smash series, but they also try to reference the Kirby series. With this in mind, our redesigned Kirby will gain 2 additional stone transformations. One based off Samus, who not only makes a cameo appearance in Stage 5-2 of Kirby's Dream Land 3, but is also a very rare statue the ability can turn to in Superstar and Superstar Ultra. Although I couldn't find much info in regards to how rare it is exactly, it is known to be disproportionately rare, which is something I want to include in this, with a chance of it being 1.72%, equal to that of Peach pulling a Stitch turnip. The other transformation is based on Captain Falcon, referencing both the flaming mercenary and the iconic Muscle Man statue that has been in several Kirby games over the years, obviously performing his downtime. And with that, we are done with the redesign. Although it was impossible for me to test my changes, with me instead having to rely on math and what I know about Ultimate and the Kirby series, I am quite satisfied with how this turned out. Although the forward smash was nerfed slightly and the down tilt is less spammable, the latter now always trips and acts as a projectile, and the former still performs the same function as it normally does, while also opening up the ability to include things such as burning side special recovery mix-ups, sword dash attack combos, and mirror reflector. Overall mobility was also improved, especially vertically, and we added 4 more copy abilities in the moveset overall. We even included a bunch of the cute hats Kirby has worn over the years. Considering the challenges involved with attempting to redesign a character who is already pretty well designed from a gameplay perspective, I think this was a job well done. Any other characters you would like to see me redesign? If so, please comment them down below. Suggestions are greatly appreciated. For now, see you in the next video.